Hello everyone, and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most shocking and disturbing cases in modern American history, the Cleveland kidnappings. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. Let's begin today's case file. Today, we're going deep into the origins of the Cleveland abduction case. Our story begins in the early 2000s, in what seemed like an ordinary Midwestern city, Cleveland, Ohio. Over the span of just 2 years, 3 young girls and women vanished from the streets. Their disappearances shook the community, but no one knew at the time that this was the beginning of more than a decade of unimaginable suffering. The first to disappear was Michelle Knight. On August 23, 2002, 21-year-old Michelle simply vanished from a Cleveland street. Unlike the other cases, the investigation into Michelle's disappearance was marked by misjudgment and serious lapses from the very start. Michelle was scheduled to appear in court that day for a custody hearing involving her son, Joey, who was in state care, but instead of treating her disappearance as suspicious, authorities assumed she had run away in frustration over the custody battle. Because she was an adult, police devoted minimal resources to the case. Later, Cleveland Police Commander Ed Tomba admitted that Michelle was hardly the focus of any leads. Shockingly, her name was removed from the National Crime Information Center database just 15 months after she vanished. This left Michelle almost invisible, unknown to the public, and practically abandoned by the system meant to protect her. Though police and the FBI later claimed the removal had nothing to do with the eventual rescue, it's undeniable that early negligence and society's indifference toward missing adults contributed to Michelle's isolation. By the time she fell into her kidnappers' hands, the world had already turned away. The second victim was Amanda Berry. On April 21, 2003, the day before her 17th birthday, Amanda disappeared while walking home after her shift at a Burger King on Cleveland's west side. Around 8 p.m., she called her sister and said she had gotten a ride home. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Unlike Michelle's case, Amanda's disappearance drew widespread media attention, and her family launched a desperate search. A week later, a man using Amanda's phone called her mother, Luana Miller, saying he had Amanda, that she was fine, and that she would come home soon. This call strongly suggested kidnapping, but the FBI still initially treated Amanda as a runaway. Her case was featured on America's Most Wanted in 2004, and again in 2005 and 2006, keeping her story alive nationwide. Despite this attention, the family faced repeated heartbreak. In 2004, self-proclaimed psychic Sylvia Brown appeared on a talk show and told Amanda's mother that Amanda was dead, brutally stating she was in water. The comment devastated Luana, who removed Amanda's photos from her walls and even gave away her computer. Yet she never fully gave up hope, searching until she passed away in 2006 from heart failure. In 2012, a prison inmate falsely claimed to know where Amanda's body was, leading police to dig up a vacant lot on Cleveland's west side, only for it to turn out to be another cruel hoax. For years, the case swung between hope and despair. The third victim was Georgina Gina de Jesus. On April 2, 2004, 14-year-old Gina was last seen using a payphone on her way home from school, near West 105th Street and Lorraine Avenue. Gina had been close friends with Ariel Castro, the daughter of the man who would soon be revealed as the kidnapper, Ariel Castro. Just before Gina went missing, she and Arlene had asked Arlene's mother, Gramilda Figueroa, if Gina could sleep over at their house, but she said no. Arlene was the last person to see Gina. Gina trusted Castro because he was her friend's father. She accepted his offer for a ride and disappeared. Because no one witnessed the abduction, an Amber Alert wasn't issued, which enraged Gina's father and led him to campaign for changes to the Amber Alert system. A year later, the FBI released a sketch of a 25 to 35-year-old Latino man with a goatee. Though Castro actually resembled the sketch listed as 5 feet 7 inches with brown eyes and a goatee, he was never considered a suspect. Gina's case was featured on America's Most Wanted, and her family held public vigils for years. In a chilling twist, Ariel Castro himself attended those vigils at least twice. He even joined search efforts and tried to get close to Gina's family. Castro's uncle later confirmed that the families knew each other and lived in the same neighborhood. Castro's son, Anthony, was a journalism student in 2004 and interviewed Gina's mother for a newspaper article about the disappearance. Unaware that his own father was responsible, police offered a $25,000 reward for information, but the truth was hidden inside Castro's home the entire time. All 3 disappearances traced back to a single man, Ariel Castro. Born July 10, 1960, in Puerto Rico, Castro had a deeply traumatic childhood marked by sexual and physical abuse. He was raped by a neighbor and an uncle, and regularly beaten and verbally abused by his mother. As an adult, He worked as a bus driver for the Cleveland School District until he was fired in 2012. In 1992, he moved into a two-story, four-bedroom home at 2207 Seymour Avenue, the house that would become a prison for 3 women. Castro's violence didn't begin with the kidnappings. He brutally abused his girlfriend, Grimilda Figueroa, breaking her nose, ribs, and arms, and even causing a blood clot in her brain. She finally escaped in 1996 with their 4 children. In 2005, she filed charges, claiming Castro threatened and kidnapped her and their daughters. She passed away in 2012 from complications of a brain tumor. Despite his violent history, Castro lived quietly in the neighborhood, working as a bus driver and blending into the community. No one suspected that behind closed doors, he was preparing to carry out one of the most horrific kidnapping crimes in American history. After Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus were brought into Ariel Castro's home, their lives descended into more than a decade of horrific captivity and relentless abuse behind closed doors. Castro's seemingly ordinary two-story house at 2207 Seymour Avenue became their personal hell. From the very moment he brought them inside, Castro established brutal dominance. Michelle Knight was dragged upstairs, tied by her hands, feet, and neck, and left hanging for hours. For the first 3 days, she wasn't given a single bite of food. This initial violence set the tone for the terror and absolute control he would maintain for years. Their captivity went far beyond being locked in a room. Castro worked methodically to strip them of dignity and reduce their existence to survival. Most of the time, they were kept in locked bedrooms, sometimes even chained to the wall like prisoners of war. In journals the women later kept, they wrote about forced sexual acts, being shut away in darkness, and the constant fear of what would come next. They described longing to escape, dreams of being reunited with their families, memories of who they once were, and the unbearable psychological torment Castro inflicted, threats, humiliation, and the feeling of being treated like animals. These entries show that Castro wasn't just imprisoning their bodies, he was trying to break their minds. The living conditions were intentionally dehumanizing. The women were forced to use a plastic bucket as a toilet, which Castro rarely emptied. Meals were limited to once a day, and showers were allowed at most twice a week. These conditions weakened them physically and emotionally, eroding their sense of self-worth. Castro even boarded up the windows with solid wood so sunlight could never enter the house. They lived in near total darkness, losing their sense of time, day after day. Among the most disturbing parts of this ordeal were the repeated assaults Michelle Knight endured, including forced miscarriages. Michelle told investigators she became pregnant at least 5 times. Each time, Castro would beat her stomach with dumbbells or his fists, slam her against walls, and deprive her of food, all to make sure she lost the baby. These weren't isolated acts of violence, they were deliberate, repeated attempts to kill an unborn child. Later, Michelle's grandmother revealed that the abuse was so severe Michelle needed reconstructive facial surgery and permanently lost hearing in one ear. At one point, Michelle managed to care for a small dog in captivity. When the dog tried to protect her by barking at Castro, he snapped its neck in front of her, a horrifying reminder that nothing and no one could protect them. Gina DeJesus also suffered repeated sexual assaults, but stated that she did not become pregnant. Amanda Berry's story took another turn in December 2006, when she gave birth to a daughter while still imprisoned. The delivery took place in a small, inflatable pool, and Castro forced Michelle Knight to act as the midwife. He warned Michelle that if the baby didn't survive, she would die too. When the newborn briefly stopped breathing, Michelle frantically performed CPR and saved the child's life. DNA tests later confirmed Castro as the father. The little girl grew up knowing Castro as dad and called his mother grandma. Castro sometimes took the child outside to visit his family, telling others she was his girlfriend's daughter or even his granddaughter. Just before his arrest in 2013, he showed the child's photo to his adult daughter and repeated this lie. In the dark reality of captivity, the child became both a source of pain and a reason for the women to keep holding on. Amanda taught her daughter to read and write, keeping a spark of hope alive for both of them. What makes this story even more chilling is how seamlessly Castro maintained his double life. He worked as a school bus driver for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District until he was fired in November 2012 for poor judgment, making illegal U-turns with kids on board, grocery shopping in the bus, and leaving children unsupervised while he went to get lunch. To the outside world, he looked like an ordinary neighbor and school employee. Even more disturbing, Castro lived in the same neighborhood as Gina DeJesus's family. He attended at least 2 public prayer vigils after Gina disappeared, and even joined in search efforts. His son, Anthony, was a journalism student at the time and wrote an article about Gina's disappearance, including an interview with her mother, without knowing his own father was responsible. Castro hid his crimes in plain sight with shocking boldness. Police missteps also contributed to the length of the women's suffering. According to CPD, officers visited Castro's home only once after the kidnappings, and that was for an unrelated incident. Castro wasn't home, and police questioned him elsewhere. Several neighbors later claimed they reported suspicious activity at the house, but police stated they had no records of such calls. Castro's son recalled that parts of the house were always locked and off limits. Just 3 weeks before the women escaped, Anthony asked Castro whether he thought Amanda Berry might ever be found. Castro allegedly replied, "Really? You think so?" A chilling hint that she might be dead. All of these pieces show how Castro maintained complete control and deception, destroying the women's lives over more than 10 long years. For more than 10 years, Ariel Castro's house had been an isolated prison, hidden in the middle of the city. But on the morning of May 6, 2013, an unexpected crack formed in the tight control he had maintained, setting the stage for everything to change. That day, Castro left the house, and Amanda Berry, who had been held captive, spotted a faint chance to escape. The outer storm door was still locked, but she suddenly realized that the big inside door wasn't locked at all. For Amanda, this wasn't just about a door being open. According to police reports, she remembered that Castro had sometimes pretended to leave the house without fully locking the door in order to test the women. Whenever they tried to escape, he brutally beat them. So Amanda feared this might be another one of his twisted tests. Years of captivity had taught her that rushing blindly for freedom could be deadly. Instead of forcing the door open, she chose caution and used her voice. When she saw neighbors through the screen of the storm door, she began screaming for help. Her cries were the first sound of a woman who had been forced into silence for a decade, and they sent shockwaves through an otherwise ordinary street. The first neighbor to respond was Angel Cordero. However, he spoke Spanish and very little English, making it hard for him and Amanda to communicate. In her memoir Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland, Amanda recalls that Cordero eventually left the scene because of the communication barrier. Even in this critical moment, language and uncertainty became obstacles in her path to freedom. Soon after, another neighbor, Charles Ramsey, arrived. He immediately grasped the urgency of Amanda's situation. Amanda told Ramsey that she and her daughter were trapped inside against their will. Without hesitation, Ramsey suggested kicking out the bottom panel of the storm door. According to her memoir, the two of them worked together to break open a hole, and Amanda crawled out through it with her 6-year-old daughter. At last, she was free. Right after escaping, Amanda and Ramsey ran to nearby houses for help. Ramsey called 911 from his home, while Amanda used another neighbor's phone to call the authorities herself. Her call became one of the most iconic moments of the entire case. Shaking but determined, she said, "Help me. I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped, and I've been missing for 10 years. And I'm here now. I'm free." It was more than a report, it was a declaration that finally revealed the truth behind years of mysterious disappearances in Cleveland. Following her call, CPD officers Michael Tracy, Barbara Johnson, and Anthony Espada arrived on the scene. With guns drawn, they entered Castro's house and walked down the upstairs hallway, identifying themselves as police. As they reached the hallway, Michelle Knight peeked out from a slightly open bedroom door and then ran straight into an officer's arms. She kept repeating, "You saved me," expressing the overwhelming relief of escaping 11 years of torment. Moments later, Gina De Jesus emerged from another room and was also taken into police protection. Amanda, Gina, Michelle, and Amanda's young daughter were all brought outside and transported to Metro Health Medical Center. Amanda and Gina were released the next day, but Michelle's injuries caused by years of torture and assault were far more severe. She wasn't able to leave until May 10th. According to her grandmother, Michelle needed reconstructive surgery and had lost hearing in one ear because of the abuse. This dramatic rescue was more than the resolution of a kidnapping. It shocked the entire Cleveland community and finally brought to light the truth behind 3 long-standing missing person cases. Amanda's quick thinking and Charles Ramsey's decisive actions created a miracle that pushed the case toward its final turning point: Ariel Castro's unavoidable reckoning with justice. He was arrested shortly afterward in a McDonald's parking lot, and his years of hidden crimes were exposed to the world. After years of neglect, missed opportunities, and inadequate early investigations, the darkness over 2207 Seymour Avenue was finally lifted. Through this moment of crisis, the 3 women reclaimed their freedom and stood at the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Amanda Berry's dramatic escape and the rescue of Michelle Knight and Gina De Jesus marked the turning point that finally exposed Ariel Castro's horrifying crimes to the world. As Castro tried to flee, He was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot shortly after the women were freed. From that moment on, the legal process became a stage where every atrocity he had committed over the past 10 years was brought to light. The legal proceedings began quickly and decisively. On May 8, Castro was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape, serious felonies in Ohio, each carrying sentences ranging from 10 years to life. His 2 brothers, Pedro and O'Neill, were also taken into custody at first, but police soon confirmed that they had no involvement in the kidnappings and released them. Castro made his first appearance in Cleveland Municipal Court on May 9. His bail was set at an astronomical $8 million, $2 million for each kidnapping charge. Prosecutors also indicated that, given the severity of the crimes, they were considering seeking the death penalty. Additional charges were still pending, including aggravated murder for intentionally causing the termination of a pregnancy, attempted murder, assault, multiple counts of rape, and a kidnapping charge for every day each woman had been held captive. The legal case reached a new peak on June 7, when a Cuyahoga County grand jury handed down the first major indictment. It listed a staggering 329 charges and covered only the period from August 2002 to February 2007. Among them were 2 counts of aggravated murder under a different section of Ohio law related to the forced termination of a pregnancy. County Prosecutor Timothy J. McGinty announced that the investigation was ongoing and that more charges would be added. He stated openly that once the indictments were complete, he would consider pursuing the death penalty. On June 12, Castro pleaded not guilty to all charges. One of his attorneys, Craig Weintraub, admitted that some charges were impossible to deny, but expressed hope for a resolution that would avoid unnecessary litigation of aggravated murder and the death penalty. The defense argued that they wanted to reduce the emotional and psychological burden the trial would place on the survivors, their families, and the community. On July 3, Castro was declared competent to stand trial. On July 12, the grand jury released a second indictment, covering the remaining years up to 2013. The total number of charges jumped to 977. These included 512 counts of kidnapping, 446 counts of rape, 7 counts of sexual assault, 6 counts of felonious assault, 3 counts of child endangerment, 2 counts of aggravated murder, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools. On July 17, Castro again pleaded not guilty, despite facing the possibility of death by lethal injection if convicted on all counts. The case reached its decisive turning point on July 26. Castro agreed to a plea deal in which he pleaded guilty to 937 of the 977 charges, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated assault. In exchange, prosecutors took the death penalty off the table. The deal sentenced Castro to life in prison without parole plus 1,000 years. He also agreed to waive his right to appeal and was legally barred from profiting in any way from his crimes. All of his property, including the house on Seymour Avenue, was forfeited, and prosecutors announced that the house would be demolished. During the plea hearing, Cuyahoga County Judge Michael Russo asked Castro sharply, "You understand you're not going to get out? Do you understand that?" Castro replied, "I do, Your Honor." He also attempted to mention his porn addiction and sexual problems, but Judge Russo cut him off, telling him those comments could be addressed at sentencing. In a statement afterward, the law firm representing Berry, DeJesus, and Knight said the women were relieved by the plea and were satisfied with the resolution, hoping the final steps of the legal process would come quickly. The August 1st sentencing hearing was the emotional climax of the entire case. Castro was officially sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 1,000 years, along with a $100,000 fine. All of his remaining assets were seized by the state. Before sentencing, Castro spoke for nearly 20 minutes, attempting to excuse his actions. He claimed he was not a monster, but a good person with addictions to prostitution and pornography. He said he never beat or tortured the women, and even insisted that most of their sexual encounters were consensual. He blamed the FBI, blamed the victims for getting in a stranger's car, and tried to soften his crimes by saying, "There was a lot of harmony in that home." But the court also heard from Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and family members of Gina DeJesus. Michelle Knight delivered one of the most powerful and unforgettable victim statements ever given in a courtroom. Facing Castro directly, she said, "You took 11 years of my life away. I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all that has happened to me, but you will face hell for eternity. I can forgive you, but I will never forget." Her statement shattered Castro's excuses and stood as a testament to the survivor's strength, resolve, and resilience. This final legal chapter sealed Castro's fate forever and gave the survivors a measure of justice as they began rebuilding their lives beyond the shadow of his crimes. After Ariel Castro faced the full weight of the law, the story moved toward its final chapter, a conclusion marked by justice, the end of the perpetrator, and, most importantly, the beginning of a new life for the survivors. For both the offender and the victims, this case reached a permanent close. First, Castro's final days. After being sentenced on August 1, 2013 to life without parole plus 1,000 years, Castro died just over a month later. On the evening of September 3, 2013, he was found hanging in his cell at the Correctional Reception Center in Orient, Ohio. He had used a bedsheet, and when officers found him, his pants were around his ankles and he was not wearing underwear. He was 53 years old. Prison staff tried to resuscitate him, but he was pronounced dead shortly after being taken to Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. The next day, Franklin County Coroner Jan Gorniak ruled his death a suicide by hanging. Castro was later cremated, and the location of his ashes was never disclosed. His death stirred controversy. A report released by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction on October 10, 2013 raised the possibility that Castro might not have died by suicide, but from autoerotic asphyxiation, a dangerous act involving intentionally restricting one's own oxygen supply for sexual pleasure. This fueled speculation because of Castro's well-documented sexual issues. However, Coroner Gorniak stood firmly by her suicide ruling and rejected that theory. The report also revealed serious failures in prison oversight. 2 guards had falsified logs, claiming they checked on Castro hours before he was found. Both were placed on paid administrative leave. Although Castro wasn't on suicide watch, he was supposed to be monitored every 30 minutes due to his notoriety. A consultant's report released on December 3 concluded there was no sign of autoerotic behavior and that all evidence pointed to suicide. Castro's cell had family photos, a Bible neatly placed like a shrine, and a journal revealing growing despair about spending his life in prison and being constantly harassed. The Ohio State Highway Patrol reviewed the case and reached the same conclusion. Several of Castro's own relatives condemned his actions and apologized to the victims. His brothers confirmed he had blocked off certain areas of his home from all visitors. His son, journalist Ariel Anthony Castro, refused to visit him in prison and said sharing his father's name had been painful. Castro's death ended his chapter with lingering questions. Did he kill himself to avoid punishment, or was it a final act of despair within the prison walls? Next, the lives of the survivors, the true heart of this story. After being rescued, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus focused on healing and rebuilding their lives. On July 9, 2013, they released a video message thanking the public for its overwhelming support. They kept their media exposure to a minimum to protect their privacy. The Cleveland Courage Fund set up to help them regain independence had raised more than $1.05 million by the time the video was released, showing the community's solidarity and global compassion. Amanda Berry received a deeply meaningful gift, a classic Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Her grandfather had promised her the car before she disappeared, and he kept it all those years, hoping she would come home. When she was finally rescued, he gave it to her. The car needed restoration, and several auto shops volunteered to repair it for free. Berry and DeJesus both received honorary diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015. Gina DeJesus began volunteering with the local Amber Alert Committee, offering comfort to families of missing children. She remains close with Amanda Berry and her family. One of the most significant milestones came in 2017, when Berry joined the Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland as a reporter for short segments on missing persons. The program aims to help families reunite with loved ones, turning her trauma into a powerful mission to help others. In April 2019, she reunited with neighbor Charles Ramsey, the man who helped save her during a televised interview 6 years after her escape. Michelle Knight, in a 2014 interview with People, spoke openly about her ordeal and her life before the abduction. After being freed, she legally changed her name and began getting tattoos as part of her healing process. During her captivity, her son had been adopted by another family. She expressed hopes of meeting him someday, but didn't want to disrupt his life until he became an adult. She planned to open a restaurant and dreamed of marriage, which she eventually achieved in 2016. Because of the severe abuse she endured, she can no longer have children, and she has hopes of adopting in the future. And finally, the physical ending of the place itself. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue where Castro lived and held the women captive was demolished on August 7, 2013 as part of his plea deal. Michelle Knight attended the demolition, handing out yellow balloons in honor of missing children. The balloons were released moments before the crane took its first swing. The house was blurred out on Google Street View, and as of 2018, the site had been transformed into a small park and garden. The space that once represented pain and captivity now serves as a place for healing and remembrance. In the end, the Ariel Castro case closed with the tragic fall of the perpetrator and the inspiring resilience of the survivors, women who transformed unimaginable suffering into strength, hope, and new beginnings. That's all for today's case file. We'll be back tomorrow with another story and another mystery. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.